Okay, so let's dive in and start talking about what I found, what the actual surprises were. And there's 8 subjects, and for women only, we're only going to be able to get a chance to go through 3, maybe 4 of them, depending on how quickly I talk. And honestly, I seriously, get your pen out, write notes on that thing. If you want to capture stuff, because there is going to be some surprises that you want to capture or you're going to lose them, because it is different than what we've heard before. Okay, so first, most important thing is a context overall about just how different men and women are. Rather than any one subject, the first thing you need to know is this big, unseen difference that rises up to the surface in some moments, and we don't know what's going on. So let me tell you this story real quickly. So when we were doing the survey for one of the other books I didn't bring up with me, for parents only, over there on the table, for parents only was the study to help parents understand their kids. And so we were surveying and studying guys and girls at the same time instead of all of my other studies at that point had been only of men for a couple of years or only of women. But suddenly I'm talking to these high school and college age people at the same time, and these differences were shining out like a spotlight. And something happened that to me just captures this. We were in a focus group room where one night I was doing a focus group of young men, and then the next night I was doing a focus group of young women. And these were mostly college age. There was a few high school, mostly college age. And we were talking about, okay, let's talk about, like in the group with the guys, let's talk about what is it that you're most worried about? Like, what feels the worst to you? What most hurts you? And what do you most need? What most lights you up? What's the thing that sort of gives you joy of life every day? You know, trying to nail down those things. And as we were in this room, have you guys ever seen those conference rooms, by the way, where there's like whiteboards on the walls with those doors that shut? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so picture this conference room with 2 whiteboards on 2 opposite walls, and they have doors that shut. So I'm doing this first night with the guys. What are they most worried about? What do they most need? And I'm writing on this whiteboard, and then I realized, oh my gosh, we're out of time, gotta go, don't have time to erase it, so I just shut the doors. The next night, I was in that same room with a group of mostly college-age girls, some high school, mostly college-age, and so I open this whiteboard and I say, okay, let's start talking about what are your needs as girls? What are you most worried about? Like, what hurts the most? And this one young woman raised her hand, and she said, excuse me, I object to this language. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, it's not our fears and our needs as girls. I mean, we're all just people. And we all have the same needs and worries and fears as people. And I said, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about your fears and your needs as people. And so I started writing, you know, and they talked, you know, for 2 hours, you know, and we had this great conversation, and I finished charting. We got it all down. And then I said, do you girls want to see what the boys said yesterday? And of course, all the girls were like, yeah, you know. So I opened these doors, and I stood back, and I watched as these girls went, because there was not one word the same. Not one. Except for like maybe the. Okay. Not one word the same. And that got across. I mean, I'd seen it, but that got across just how radically different we are. And we stumble over those differences without realizing it. So, what was on the board? So let's talk about the differences between men and women in terms of our primary needs, okay? So for us as women, starting as girls, like on the board, and then later as we grow into adulthood, for us as women, it's all about, am I lovable? Am I beautiful? Am I special? Am I worthy of being loved for who I am on the inside? And so we need to feel loved and cherished and adored, and like this man in our life just absolutely loves us, okay? Because it's all about, am I worthy of being loved for who I am on the inside, okay? The guys, and later, the adult men, they're like, like, yeah, that's nice, that's important, but it didn't make it on the board, okay? For the guys, it's a totally different. It's, am I able? Am I adequate? Am I any good at what I do on the outside? Totally, completely different. So where we women most need to feel loved and cherished and adored, and that's what lights us up, and that's kind of what we think is the whole point of having the relationship to begin with, right? Like, if you're not going to feel loved, what's the point? And it's a huge surprise for us to find out that for men, that's not the point at all. And that if they had to make a choice, and now this is what shocked me, okay? If they had to make a choice, which they wouldn't want to have to make this choice, but if they had to, they would actually choose to give up feeling that their wife or their girlfriend loved them if they could just feel that she respected them. And I'm seeing some blank faces, so let me say that one more time. And I'm going to put this in personal terms, if you don't mind. What this means is that your husband or your boyfriend, if he's like most other men and he had to make a choice, he would actually choose to give up feeling that you love him. If he could just feel that you respect him and you trust him and you believe in him and you admire him and you appreciate him, and all of those things are more important to the average man even than feeling that you love him. That is a huge difference between men and women. And it gets us as women into so much trouble because we women are really good at showing love. Okay? Think about the irony of that, okay? We naturally say, I love you, right? It just sort of comes out of us. I love you, and we do all these loving things. And at the same time, without realizing it, maybe we're criticizing him a lot. Or we're questioning his decisions all the time. Or maybe we're teasing him in public about, you tried to fix the plumbing, you couldn't fix the plumbing to save his life, or whatever, And we're doing these things that for us, we're like, yeah, whatever. But for him, it's this, she doesn't respect me. She doesn't think I'm any good at what I do on the outside. And it's so painful. And we have no idea that that is going on in his heart. We have no idea how painful that is, or that pain is legitimate, like we were just saying. It's the way that men are wired, just like there's a way that women are wired. So we have to understand that and what it looks like. Now, here's the thing. This is really where we get into trouble, okay? Because I think most of us as women, we generally, not in every case, but we generally do respect the man in our life, right? We generally do appreciate him. And we have no idea that we're sending him the message that we don't. And we have no idea that sometimes our assumptions and our thoughts, he's reading stuff into it, and we're like, but I didn't intend to send that message. But he's actually capturing a little germ of something that actually is there underneath the surface. For example, how many of us have ever thought to ourselves or said out loud, what was he thinking? Okay, we all know, most of us have said that or thought that. Okay, here's the translation of that. Okay, you ready? The translation of that is, he wasn't thinking. That's the translation. That's what that means. Now, here's one of the other surprises in the books. One of the other things that I learned. Guys think about everything. They just do it differently than we do. Because if we're thinking about something, you know about it, right? Because we women are verbal processors. That's literally, there's a brain science difference here, that we think things through while we're talking them through. That actively helps most women, not all, but in most cases, that helps us think things through. That's the way our brain is wired. Guys are exactly the opposite. It is incredibly difficult and uncomfortable for a guy to think something through while he's talking it through, especially if it's a big emotional issue. And instead, he goes underground. It's really fascinating when I ask the guys to sort of explain, like, help me see how you go through this process. Because here's what they said. They said it sort of feels like this internal chess match. And they're doing this thing of, okay, well, if I do this, then this has to have happened over here. But if I do that, then this thing has to have happened before. And they do this internal chess match, sometimes for days, and it pops out the other end as a decision. And if we don't know this, he says, I think we should do this. And you say, well, I don't know, what about this thing over here? And he's thinking, I just spent 3 days thinking about this. We didn't know, okay? But I realized that sometimes there is actually an assumption underneath, like, what was he thinking? Because that was a really boneheaded move, okay? Now, let's back up a minute before I sort of give an example of this and explain why this bothers them so much. Okay, let's nail this down, because this is another one of the things that I covered in the book that is so difficult for us to realize or believe. I think most of us have a hard time believing this one. It turns out there is a huge difference between how men look on the outside and how they feel about themselves on the inside. See, men look so confident, and we sometimes think, you know, he looks a little too confident in himself. He could be taken down a peg or two. Okay? And on the inside, what I heard from almost every guy I talked to was totally different. On the inside, here's the internal feeling of a man. All day, every day. This is literally running, as one guy said, this is running through my veins. I'm never without it. The way they described it is this internal feeling of, I want to tackle a challenge. I want to do great things. I want to be a great husband or a great boyfriend, or I want to be a wonderful father, or I want to be a great businessman, or a great pastor, or whatever, right? Okay, so I want to do great things, but I'm really not sure I know exactly what I'm doing, and I hope nobody finds out. And what happens is, underneath the surface, there's this enormous self-doubt and this enormous vulnerability that we don't even know is there. And it's like a raw nerve, and you can hit that nerve without having any idea that that's what you're doing. And certainly without, in most of the cases, without intending to. So here's an example of one of the things that will hit that nerve. For example, when one man said, anytime, and he sort of gave me a rule. This kind of cracked me up. He said, anytime a woman starts a sentence with, why did you? ... You know, why did you make this decision? Why did we do it this way? If you're in a business meeting, why did you choose that pricing, Bob? He may be answering you just normally. On the inside, it's like, oh, she doesn't think that I know what I'm doing. And the reason is because they think they're not sure they know what they're doing. Because remember, we think male ego, and we don't realize, no, there is no male ego. What it is male self-doubt underneath the surface, and it's being triggered, and it hurts. Remember the whiteboards? The deepest heart cry of a man is, am I able? Am I adequate? I want to be good at what I do on the outside, but am I? If the heart cry of a woman is, am I lovable? The heart cry of a man is, do I measure up? And he's looking to the people around him, especially you, for the answer to that question. And that is where we can be sending a signal that, no, you don't measure up. And we have no intention of sending it. And it's so important for us to realize, you know what? It's not that they have this inflated view of themselves and we're just bringing them down to ground level. No. It's underneath the surface. They're starting below ground level. And if that's true, what an incredible opportunity we have to look for every opportunity to build them up. Because that has this incredible power. So sometimes the things that bother them or that hit that nerve or that trigger that insecurity or that self-doubt under the surface, to us, we would never have seen it that way. Okay, like the why did you question. So here's an example of this, and this is also an example of that thinking things through thing, you know, the what was he thinking. So Jeff and I, silly little example, but we were at some friends' home group not that long ago. And these friends had a home group where they decided to go through our books, and they had all these young kids in the home group, and you know, kind of ages 9 and under, including little babies. And they said, you know, we're having issues. We just need a little bit of shoring up in our marriages, and can you just come and just share with us? And we said, of course. You know, you guys are really good friends, of course. So we were sitting there that night with them, and it was really interesting. I shared this example of the why did you, and I heard over my shoulder, I heard the husband go, and I looked sideways. Sorry, my microphone is, sounds like my microphone may be going out. Hold on just a second, because I don't want that to get distracting. Okay, let's see if that'll work. So anyway, so I heard him give this kind of grunt, and I looked sideways quickly enough that I saw him and his wife lock eyes, you know, and she was going, and he was like, you know, and I'm like, okay, clearly there's an example here. Would you like to share with the class? and they kind of looked at us, they're like, oh, well, okay, something happened last night. We were at, you know, didn't like each other very much last night because there was something going on. And I said, so what was the example? What happened? And he said, well, and they told this story. So it turns out that she had gone out with some girlfriends for dinner, and they have these 3 little kids. She had come home after her dinner out, looked in the fridge and said, hey, honey, you know, why did you give the kids juice instead of milk at dinner? And he said, and I got upset, and she got defensive, and it just escalated, and I had just finished telling the group that one of the ways to address this, instead of why did you, because if you have to ask why, you have to ask why, right? So I've asked a lot of men, what do you say instead? And this one man looked at me like the answer was so obvious, like I had 2 heads or something. And he said, how different would it be if you just said, I know you must have had a reason. Can you help me understand what it is? Okay. And I went, okay, you know, good idea. It's not saying you idiot, you know, you're a bonehead. It's I'm not there yet. Help me understand. So here we are in the home group. And they just explained this, you know, wife had said, why did you give the kids juice instead of milk at dinner? So I said, okay. So turned to the husband and I said, okay, James, so help me understand. So what was the thinking? What was the reasons? And he said, well, I looked in the fridge and I saw we only had this much milk in the carton, and if I gave them milk for dinner, they wouldn't have enough milk for cereal in the morning. So I was going to go out and get more milk at the grocery store, but the baby was already asleep, and I would have had to wake the baby up just to go to the grocery store. And I didn't want to do that because it messes with his sleep schedule. We've just gotten the baby down onto a schedule. So I thought, you know what? I'll give the kids juice, but I'll dilute it by half with water. So the young one is really the one that has the problem with the sugar in the juice. And so if she gets up in the middle of the night, I'll just go in and I'll rub her back and she'll go right back to sleep. So that's what I was thinking. And the wife went, you know, and her jaw literally dropped. You know how that's sort of a stereotype, but her jaw literally dropped. And she was like, oh my gosh, I was thinking you dodo. You know, I was thinking you're a bonehead. You know, and I realized how often we do that. And so it's not necessarily that they're hearing disrespect where we don't intend it. Sometimes they're hearing disrespect that we don't realize is disrespect, but it is. And there's just a radar for that. And so here's my suggestion for you guys. The what do you do about this for this one? the next time you think to yourself or you want to say out loud, what was he thinking? Stop and think to yourself, Shanti promised me he had a reason for this. And then say, help me understand. And you know what? I will almost guarantee you, now this is not going to be 100% of the time, but it's going to be close. I will almost guarantee you that you will hear this well thought out string that's just amazing. Okay, we're getting to the point where I'm going to need a different microphone, I think. Sorry. Okay, pause. Sorry. Should I just use the, all right. Okay. Check. Is this on? Not yet. Hold on. Thank you, Oliver. I had to make Oliver an honorary girl, too. Testing. Is that good? All right. So, see, I'm like, I must be Italian or something because I talk with my hands. So this is like, all right. Okay, so truly, that would be my first suggestion, is in the what do you do about it, is truly, next time you find yourself in that what was he thinking mode, really stop and say, no, you know what, he probably does, I'm not there yet, but help me understand. And you know what, if you do that, you will approach it automatically from a respectful assumption rather than a disrespectful one. Okay, now, there are many different ways this plays out, many different ways that men can hear a message that we don't intend. Now, here's an example, though, of a positive way of approaching this, because it's not just about avoiding that signal of disrespect that we didn't intend, but a lot of women are like, what do I say instead? What's the positive thing? What if I want to show my husband how much I appreciate him? What do I say? Or if I want to tell my son something that's really going to build him up, what do I say? So I have realized that over the years, I really think, I'm not 100% ready to say this publicly yet, but I'll tell you, I am really close to declaring that there is an equivalent of I love you. Because for men, I love you is nice, but it's not it. It's not the thing that really hits them like it hits us. And I learned really quickly that it doesn't do to sort of follow you around the husband around the house and coo, oh, honey, I respect you so much. After a while, my poor husband was like, you know what, can we time out? I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it. But it just doesn't have the same ring to it. And so I've been trying to find out from guys, what is it that hits them? What is it that has the same ring to it? And one of the things that is powerful is, honey, I'm so proud of you. Oh, that hits a man in every way he needs to be hit. However, it's not as everyday, okay? So what do you say in an everyday way that is the equivalent of I love you? And that's where we have two words. You ready for this? This is emotionally powerful for a man. Thank you. Believe it or not, noticing what he does on the outside and thanking him for it has this enormous emotional impact, believe it or not. I don't get it because I'm not a guy, but so far everything I've seen has been thank you for playing with the kids, even though, you were so tired from work and I know you just wanted to crash on the couch. Thank you for taking them outside. Thank you for mowing the lawn, even though it was so hot outside. Thank you for working so hard to help support this family. Thank you for the other day when you were so grumpy because you'd had a bad day at work. Thank you. I could see you were trying to pull yourself out of being grumpy just so that we wouldn't be affected. Wow, thank you. Those kinds of things, we think of them as just little comments. But to guys, that's oxygen. It's huge. And here's the problem. I realized that I think some of those things, but I don't think to say them. Like, there was one day I was driving into the garage, and Jeff was out mowing the lawn, and this is in hot Atlanta. It was really hot outside. And I realized I would have driven into the garage, and I would have thought to myself, oh, that's nice of him. I never would have thought to say it. Or, if I would have said it, here's how it would have come out. I can't believe I'm going to admit this out loud. Here's how it would come out. Oh, thanks for mowing the lawn, but you missed a spot. And we think, what? But he's hearing what you did on the outside wasn't good enough. Okay, now I can tell from some of your faces that you're having the same thought that I did the first 20 times I heard this, and I'm going to put this into words, even though we'd never say this out loud. But what you're thinking inside, some of you, is, oh, please, grow up, get over it. Kind of, that shouldn't bother him. And I realized, you know what? We're saying that because it wouldn't bother us. It wouldn't bother me. He's not me. He's wired very differently by a God who knew what he was doing. And so putting ourselves in that shoes of recognizing, you know what? He will notice the spot that he missed already, I promise. Because guys are very attuned to whether what they're doing on the outside is any good. Instead, okay, somebody said this to their husband the other day, I can tell, just from that reaction, okay? So this seriously, if you will find the things that you can say thank you about, you may see him light up in ways that you haven't seen in years. Now, I always tell people, if you're having a hard time believing what I'm saying, seriously, don't believe me, try it. It's amazing. Try it. And you know, you're going to get this really interesting reaction. I had one young woman I was talking to, and she said, you know, Shanti, I'm not sure I believe what you're saying. She's probably 23 years old, part-time college student, and I said the same thing to her. If you don't believe me, just give it a shot and let me know what happens. So that night, she was part-time college student, part-time waitress. She went off to her waitressing job. And there had been this guy at the waitressing job named Kyle that she'd kind of had her eyes on for a while and thought he was kind of cute, and they hadn't had that much chance to interact. But that night, she noticed something that happened. And apparently, Kyle and the manager of the restaurant had been getting into it over the last couple weeks and had been having this big conflict, and it had been really making it miserable for everybody else that worked there. And that night, she watched across the room as the manager came over to Kyle and started trying to get into it with him again, and Kyle just refused. He said, you know what, this is making it miserable for everybody. I'm not going to do this with you, man. Let's take it offline. We can talk about it later. This is not the place to talk about it. And he walked away. So this young woman I had been talking to went up to Kyle a couple of minutes later, and she said, you know, I noticed what you did. I noticed what happened. He was trying to provoke you, and you wouldn't let him. You were protecting us. Thank you. You were a man of honor. Thank you. And she walked away. She said later, Shanti, he followed me around all night. Because here was a woman who noticed what he did and said it was good. And that do I measure up question, here's somebody who thinks I measure up. It is powerful, not just for a husband or a boyfriend, but for our sons. As they're forming this identity, it is so important, so important. We can get to that during questions and answers, which we need to stop and actually get to questions. But let me mention one thing at the very end, the very last surprise, real quickly. Because the very last surprise that we got on the survey was just, it stunned me. It made me almost cry. Because I gave the men a blank space. And I said, you know, we've had all these multiple choice questions. What's the one most important thing you wish your wife or a girlfriend, that you wish that she knew, but you feel you can't explain to her or tell her? And I thought it would be a chance for the men to vent or, you know, say all these different things. And instead, when I got the surveys back, the survey spreadsheets back with these hundreds of responses, I almost started crying. Because the top response by far, when they could say anything, the one most important thing I wish my wife knew is how much I love her. And I realized our guys really do have this goodwill towards us. They do care about us so much, just like we care about them. It's just sometimes we're missing each other. And it's really a great opportunity to have that goodwill back and learn some of this stuff. Because have you been getting a sense as I've been talking just how much power God has put in our hands as women, have you been getting that? To either build them up or to tear them down? Final quote before we do questions here. I speak all the time, and one of my favorite formats is actually where a male pastor will bring me in on a Sunday morning and interview me on stage as the sermon time at church. And because both men and women hear this stuff at the same time, and it's really, really helpful. So this one pastor was doing this, and he is this man that I have so much respect for. He pastors this giant church, and he's on TV a lot. He's written all these books, and his congregation just really appreciates him. And he said something at the end of our time together that just took my breath away. We had been talking about this how much I love her thing. And at the end, he concluded, he stood up on stage in front of this massive auditorium that fits several thousand people at once. And he said, I know you think you've got a good pastor. I know you think that. You don't. You've got a great pastor's wife. That's how men feel about us. So let's just take that as truly recognizing, sorry, Spider-Man reference, with great power comes great responsibility. And let's use that. Let's really take that responsibility seriously and use that well. So I know we have a few minutes for questions.